I don't think you can say enough for the job that Jayden Daniels has done in fast tracking the program and where Dan Quinn is looking to take it. All right, it's the Breer Report, and we got a lot to wrap up from week 4. And I think the first topic for the week is probably what the first topic is for the first month of the season, and that's how Jayden Daniels has played in Washington. Completion percentage over 80% at Arizona. They blow a very competitive Cardinals team. The Cardinals team has played a lot better off the field, on the road, on Sunday afternoon. And there are a lot of things that are right about the way the Commanders are playing. Now you can see a certain play style. You can see how hard they play. You can see a program emerging. You can see young players contributing. But so much of it comes back to what Jayden Daniels has been able to do in his first year as an NFL player and over his first month as a starting quarterback. And whether or not this is sustainable, some of the numbers certainly aren't. His completion percentage will drop. I can promise everybody that. But, I think what we're seeing here is a quarterback who's very much prepared for the moment. 55 college starts. This is a guy who really had to work for it in college. Played 3 years at Arizona State. At the end of that, he very well could have declared for the draft. And if he had declared for the draft at that point, there's a good chance that he might have gone undrafted. And again, this is a guy whose trajectory in college was a little funky. His first year, he started every game at Arizona State as a true freshman, showed a lot of promise. His second year, it was COVID. The Arizona State team only played 4 games. So he had very limited action as a sophomore, comes back as a junior, and that program was a crime scene. I mean, like they were under investigation for a handful of different things. His year didn't go very well. He had 10 interceptions against 10 touchdown passes. And again, at that point, he was draft eligible. He could have gone to the NFL. He chose not to. And this is where the transfer portal can be really effective for players. He used the transfer portal to get to LSU. Obviously, the rest is history. He wins the Heisman Trophy there. But on top of just playing better, he had the experience of having gone through all of this, getting 55 college starts, having to play in 2 major programs, having to play in 2 major conferences, having to see so many different types of defenses, having to run different types of offenses. The library of stuff in that kid's head is vast because he's seen a lot, because he's played a lot, and because all of that thoroughly prepared him for the NFL. So I think that's one piece of it that we should not undersell. His readiness for the NFL for some of the same reasons Brock Purdy was really ready for the NFL a couple years ago as a rookie. Jayden Daniels is ready for the NFL. I think what's really most impressive about it, though, is where he's at and the stage the Commanders are at with their building. This is not a startup, or this is not an established situation. This is not Caleb Williams going into the third year of Matt Eberflus, the third year of Ryan Poles in Chicago. This is not, Bo Nix, going into year 2 of Sean Payton in Denver. This is not J.J. McCarthy going into year 3 of Kevin O'Connell and Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah in Minnesota. This is very much a reset year for the Washington Commanders. If you remember last year, they traded their top 2 edge rushers, Chase Young and Montez Sweat, in midseason. Elsewhere on defense, they've got an issue in corner, which is part of a piece of that, where a piece of that is, how Emmanuel Forbes has not developed as they would have liked as their first round pick. And then you look on the offensive side of the ball where Jayden Daniels plays. Well, there's another strikeout and a first round pick at receiver in Jahan Dotson, which has left them with not a ton outside of Terry McLaurin there. And then they've had a major tackle issue. And so you look at where he is and you look at what he's done, and a big part of that is due to the amount of experience he had as a college player and going through everything that he went through as a college player and seeing all the things that he saw as a college player. But to me, it also has to do with the talent that he's got and his ability to take a team and put it on his back, which he was asked to do at Arizona State more so than LSU. LSU last year, he was throwing to Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas. He had a left tackle who, in Will Campbell, will probably be a top 5 pick in this year's draft. So he's seen both sides of it, and he's been able to go into a situation where he's not throwing to top flight receivers outside Terry McLaurin, who's very, very good. He's got a just tackle a situation in transition. And, he's been able to take the team and play the sort of game it needs him to play to win. And, here the Commanders are at 3-1 in first place in the NFC East, and Jayden Daniels is playing great, great football. I don't think you can say enough for the job that Jayden Daniels has done in bringing that program along and fast tracking the program and where Dan Quinn is looking to take it. And, I think there were a ton of great examples from the last week that they spent in Arizona. They had the Monday night game in Cincinnati. Everybody knows how well they played there. They went straight to Arizona from there. There were examples from the ground in Arizona the week they spent out there. Dan Quinn's office was two doors down from the quarterback's room. Dan told me after their game on Sunday that the light was on at 9 p.m. in that quarterback's room, and that quarterback's room was full. So it's a kid who knows what it's going to take to make it in the NFL, who's paying the price to make it in the NFL, and who has so much experience, both life and football experience that he's gone through over the last 5 years that have prepared him to put a Commanders team on his back more so than most rookies would be able to. Topic number two. The Baltimore Ravens 2 weeks ago were 0-2. The Chiefs lost. Everybody could excuse that. It's opening night at Arrowhead. The banner's going up. There's a lot going on. That's a tough spot for any team to go into as the road team. Then they lose in week two to the Raiders, and you got some arched eyebrows, and you got some people asking the question where the Ravens are at. And it was interesting because I had those same questions going back to May and June. And I was asking a lot of the same questions that a lot of you were after 2 weeks. And when I started to poke around a little bit more in May and June and tried to figure out philosophically what the Ravens were doing, some of the stuff that came back was we're trusting in our program. We're trusting our ability to develop players, to develop coaches. And it may not look right at the very beginning, but it will look right eventually. So when people ask me about the Ravens start, I said, like, let's just hit the pause button and see where this goes. Let's let this develop for a little bit, because this is one of these teams that feels like they're going to be there in the end, that has the flexibility to use the first month of the season as an extended preseason. And so where did the transition happen for this team? Well, I think if you look at it, you've got a completely new backfield. So you have Derrick Henry and Justice Hill back there playing in the spots that Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins had occupied over the last few years. You have three new starting offensive linemen, and this is where the draft and develop thing comes into focus. They lose Kevin Zeitler, John Simpson, and Morgan Moses. Three very experienced veteran linemen who've played a lot of football, especially Zeitler and Moses, both those guys in their 30s. Instead of going out and just buying replacements for those guys, they trusted in their pipeline. And so they had at guard Daniel Falele and Andrew Voorhees, they had drafted and developed. Falele in his third year, Voorhees in his second year coming through the program. And then at right tackle to replace Moses, they had Patrick McCarry, who's been there for a while, and they drafted Roger Rosengarten out of Washington. So they had four players they felt like this will eventually be enough. And in the beginning, it didn't look good, but eventually it's become enough. Same thing on defense. They lose Patrick Queen, a major piece, a big piece of who they've been, who they want to be over the last couple of years. Lights really come on for him. Had come on for him since Roquan Smith got there. And so they lose Queen, who was a real big playmaker for them last year. You talk to people they thought Trenton Simpson might wind up being an upgrade. He's a 2023 day two pick out of Clemson, but it was going to take a little bit of time. And then go to the edge position, right? So they lose Jadeveon Clowney. Well, we got to trust in what we have in the building. So can we get better play out of David Ajabo and Odafe Owe? And look, guys, at the beginning, it didn't look great, right? Like week one, week two, where are the Ravens at? What's going on? How are they going to make this work? And sure enough, here we are in week four. And I don't know that they're not the best team in football, the way that they were for the balance of the regular season last year. With the way Lamar's playing, with the way some of the other young players in their team have come along, Zay Flowers, Isaiah Likely, who, they raved about during training camp and said we're ready to take on bigger roles. And they jumped all over the Bills on Sunday night. And the Bills had been playing as well as anybody in football. In fact, I'd say 5, 6 days earlier, that was about as complete a performance as you're going to see from an NFL team, the way they beat down the Jaguars. And I know the Jaguars aren't very good right now, and there's definitely some turmoil there. But you don't generally see the sort of beatdown that we saw the Bills put on the Jaguars on Monday night. And they went into Baltimore, and that thing, I mean, Derrick Henry, 87 yards right off the top. That game was over quick. And the Ravens showed who they are. And I think so much of it is seeing guys coming through their program, like just how they've invested in developing people, players, coaches, just developing people. And there's another example of it from Sunday night, which was Zach Orr. And did Zach Orr have to have a high bar to reach for and replacing Mike McDonald, who once replaced Wink Martindale? Well, sure. But if you go back and you look at Mike McDonald in his second game as an NFL defensive coordinator, the Dolphins went for over 500 yards and scored 42 points. And there were a lot of people saying, well, did they do the right thing in going to Mike McDonald and moving on from Wink Martindale? Well, that wound up looking pretty good in the long run, too. And here we are, lo and behold, Zach Orr's group didn't look great in week 2 of 2024 and losing to the Raiders, but now he's got his feet underneath him a little bit. They develop people in Baltimore. They develop Foyle. They develop Voorhees. They develop Makari. They develop Rosengard. They develop Trenton Simpson. They develop Zach Orr. They develop people, and they put themselves now in a position to really start rolling. And Sunday night was a great example of the program, the strength of the program in Baltimore, and what John Harbaugh has built there over the last 17 years. Topic number 3, while we're there and talking about the top contenders in the AFC, the Chiefs are 4-0. They've showed a lot of guts, a lot of guile in getting to 4-0. That Chargers team that they played against is a tough team. Now, that team was similarly banged up in playing with a hobbled Justin Herbert, without their two tackles, Rashawn Slater and Joe Alt were both out, without Joey Bosa. So that's a scrappy Charger team that was also shorthanded. We saw what the Chiefs were capable of. I think the big play to Xavier Worthy sort of bailed them out and got them through some of their offensive struggles. You see them lean on Travis Kelce a little bit more. And the issue that the Chiefs have now is they may have to reconfigure what their strategy was offensively for 2024. If you talk to people there over the summer, what they would tell you is they felt like the offense had a chance to be not just a little better, but a lot better than it was the last 2 years based on the personnel they had on hand. And the vision was we got Hollywood Brown on one side, we've got Xavier Worthy on the other side. Both those guys can fly, both those guys can track the ball, both those guys are going to force defenses to play us a certain way. And those two guys over the top are going to create space underneath where Travis Kelce and Rashee Rice are just going to eat up yards. We'll see on Rice's status if he's got a chance to come back this year. It doesn't look great. Hollywood Brown, a lot of uncertainty on when he's going to be back. So now you're left with Worthy, you're left with Kelce. Kelce, of course, at his age, at 35 years old, is going to have to be managed through the season. So there's that piece of it as well. So what are you looking at offensively now? Where do you go offensively if you are the Kansas City Chiefs? I would just say this. Their general manager, Brett Veach, has done a very good job of serving the team that he's got right now. Whatever that team is, serving the team he's got right now over the last few years and making changes and bringing in guys that his team might have needed in a pinch to make it work over the course of the season. A great example of it, a couple of years ago, they traded for Kadarius Toney, who was a very, very clearly a distressed asset in New York. Kadarius Toney comes in and plays well and helps them win a Super Bowl. Now, did it work out long term? No, but it helped them win a Super Bowl. And that's what really matters in Kansas City with Patrick Mahomes as your quarterback. So I'd expect that the Chiefs are going to be turning over every couch cushion looking for some sort of deal. Now, will they take a massive swing? That's a little harder to see. I don't know if the Browns would move off of an Amari Cooper. Amari Cooper, I think, has been affected to some degree by what happened with Brandon Ayuk, the Browns being involved in that. Um, are they planning on signing Amari Cooper after the year? I think that's an open question. So I don't know if something of that level would be what you were looking at, but certainly I think you look at some of the teams that might be sellers getting closer to the trade deadline. Would Carolina be willing to move on from Adam Thielen? Would Carolina be willing to move on from Deontay Johnson? Deontay Johnson's obviously had some questions from a football makeup standpoint, but you put him in that environment in Kansas City, maybe you get a better player. And he's played well early this season for Carolina. Tennessee, they win last night, but are they in a position where they're going to be a seller going into the trade deadline? And so do you look at a DeAndre Hopkins from there, or do you go the distressed asset route, right? So spoke about the Titans there. There's somebody like Treylon Burks, who isn't playing very much right now, but was a first round pick. Does he appeal to you in the same way Kadarius Toney appealed to you? So there should be options out there. I think the Chiefs, if you're Kansas City right now, you take a deep breath, you reassess, you get your update on Rashi Rice and his availability. Again, doesn't look great. Get your update on the availability of Hollywood Brown. You see how he comes along over the next couple of weeks. You do have the flexibility of being able to wait here because you've got Patrick Mahomes as your quarterback, so the whole thing's not going to come undone because of a couple of injuries. And then you look at reimagining your offense because without Hollywood Brown, without Rashi Rice, it's going to be really hard to carry out the vision that you had for the offense at the beginning of the year. Again, the good news is you've got a quarterback who can carry out any sort of vision that you want. All right, that'll be it for the Breer Report for October 1st. We will be back with the mailbag in midweek and another Breer Report for you on Friday. We'll see you guys then.